Good morning, Center of Spiritual Living.
Good morning, Marcy.
Our inspired readings today are on the topic of receiving as important as giving. God is life, and life gives itself to us. It does not give some of itself, it gives all of itself. But the gift without a receiver cannot complete itself in individual life. Ernest Holmes, Science of Mind, page 348. Until we can receive with an open heart, we're never really giving with an open heart. When we attach judgment to receiving help, we knowingly or unknowingly attach judgment to giving help. Brene Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection. Let us open our hearts to receive the gifts of Spirit by affirming this truth together.
Knowing God is my source, I express gratitude in a generous way, and I open my heart to receive money and good of every kind. This comes to me in increasing quantities through multiple channels and in a continuous stream.
Yeah. Woohoo!
Thank you, Marcy. So this entire month is a revisiting of this law of circulation, the law of giving and receiving, and the awareness. I just love that quote that life gives itself of itself, and we use life and God and spirit kind of interchangeably, but this presence gives of itself generously, abundantly, continuously, and gives all of itself, himself, herself, however you want to say it, gives of itself so magnificently and totally. And so I want to take some time and look at this idea of receiving because, we do a lot in spiritual teachings about the importance of giving, right? We speak of it all the time. And yet, the other side of the coin is receiving, being not only a generous giver, but a generous and grateful receiver. So, I'd like to start with a story that is a story about a learned man who decided to visit a Zen master. And so, when he came to the Zen master, he said, I would like to receive enlightenment from you. And the Zen master, began to speak, and the man then began to tell him all of the knowledge that he'd already gained, and all of the wisdom, and all of his accomplishments. And so finally, the Zen master stopped him, and he said, let's continue this discussion over tea. So the two of them sat down for tea, and the tea was delivered by one of the support people for the master. And so the Zen master picked up the teapot and started pouring the cup of tea for this learned man. And he poured and poured, and pretty soon it went over the rim of the cup into the saucer. And pretty soon then it flowed over the saucer onto the table, and then eventually onto the robes of the learned man. And the learned man finally said, enough! Stop! And so the Zen master stopped and looked at him, and he said, you are like this teacup. You're so full that there's no space for anything new. So come back to me when you've emptied your cup, when you've emptied your mind. So this is a beautiful story that teaches us about receptivity, that we cannot receive the great good, the enlightenment that we so deeply desire until we're willing to empty ourselves of all of the stuff, all of the mind chatter and So your dragnet was just beautiful. I mean, it just ties in gorgeously. Of all of that clutter that prevents us from fully receiving the gift of life and all that it offers, all the love, all the peace, all the joy, all of the abundance of every kind, new ideas, all of that is available the moment that we're willing to empty the cup of our minds. So let's use the idea of the sun. So this is kind of a physical demonstration of how this works. The sun is forever shining, whether the clouds are there or not, or whether we're in a dark basement or not. And so the idea is to come out into the light, to be willing and available to the light. One of the ways that we can empty our cups, practical ways, and I like bringing this back to something that's practical that you can take home and use, is something that we revisited at the workshop yesterday, which was something called morning pages, the artist's way. Any of you remember that? Oh, yeah, or know about that? Yes. So the beauty of this practice of just writing, just emptying our minds out on paper, and she suggests 3 pages each morning, is that it clears the mind of all the stuff so that creativity can pour through, more energy, more awareness, more present moment awareness, so that we can be more fully available. We are in a higher frequency than we are when we first woke up. Because I don't know how many of you noticed, but sometimes when you wake up, it's like all of the stuff is right there. And so it's important to empty that. And maybe not just in the morning, but any time during the day, if we notice our minds are cluttered, there are methods that we can use to eliminate that. So morning pages is one. Our friend Charlie Curtis taught us another one that's a little bit briefer and very powerful. It's the one that I've been using, called mindful journaling, where you simply just write snippets, not the whole entire thought, but snippets of each thought that comes through. And very quickly, usually before you get to number 20, it clears out, and new thoughts, new higher vibrational frequency thoughts begin to come through. So those are things we can do on the mental level. Meditation is designed for that. Meditation, rightly used, is a way of emptying the mind and open ourselves to receiving the great good that spirit is. So that practice of receiving takes place in meditation. And then there are things that we can do in the physical realm. Decluttering our closets, decluttering our drawers. And anybody do that, and just not only does it feel wonderful, but have you noticed that things begin to flow again in your life? It's amazing how that works, but it's an out picturing. And in fact, I remember back when I used to be a school counselor, one of the teachers said, if there was a student with a lot of clutter all over the floor and in their desk, the teacher would say that that child has a cluttered mind. So it's our environments reflect what's going on within. So we can begin to do the decluttering within, but then also we can help the process by decluttering our lives and putting things in order. So again, the point is to declutter, to open the way, to be filled by the Spirit, to be filled by the good, the new ideas that are available to us. That's that presence of life that is ever giving of itself. Spiritual mind treatment, which we've spent the last 2 months reviewing, is a beautiful way of reminding ourselves of this truth of life ever giving of itself, the abundance of life, the goodness of life, and that we are one with that. We are that presence individualized. And then also we can affirm and declare that there is nothing in me that in any way can inhibit, delay, deny, or obstruct the flow of the great good. I give thanks for this truth. I release this word to the universal law of mind, and so it is. That's a brief version of how spiritual mind treatment is designed also to declutter when we understand its purpose, not only to clutter, but to fill it with the good. Another way that we can heighten our ability to receive or expand our ability to receive is to let go of judgment about receiving. How many of us carry a judgment about receiving? And you may not even notice it. It might be very subtle. However, notice how generously and gratefully you receive a compliment. Notice how gratefully and generously you receive a meal that somebody wants to pay for you. Somebody wants to pay a meal for you. Notice how generously and gratefully you receive anything, a gift. So here's what happens is because many of us have had the idea that it's better to give than receive. How many of you were brought up with that idea? It's better to give than receive. Okay, think about this. So then with that idea, then we begin to attach self-worth and more value to giving than receiving. Okay, how does that work with inhaling and exhaling? What if we keep exhaling, symbolic of giving, and we exhale and we exhale and we exhale and we exhale and we never inhale? What happens? Yes. And so when we give and give and give and give and don't receive, we create burnout. I mean, we literally are putting ourselves in the process of dying. We're not living in the balance of life, that beautiful giving and receiving of life. So it's really like saying it's more blessed to exhale than inhale. And how silly is that? So again, I think many of these teachings were meant to help people get into the mode of giving. And giving generously is a very important piece of it. But the other side of the coin is receiving generously and also giving ourselves the time each day in spiritual practice to truly fill our cup up, empty our cup, and to fill our cup up with good and more good, the spirit of life, so that we begin to live from the overflow. So we're giving from a place of overflow instead of depletion. In the Notes from the Universe by Mike Dooley, he says, when you receive, not only do you affirm your own worthiness and open your way for more abundance from the universe, you make possible even greater abundance and joy for the giver. That was a huge lesson for me. I remember some time ago when I first heard that, it really struck a chord with me. That if I turned down a gift that somebody was offering me, that was meant to support me in some way or another, I was literally not only blocking my own good, I was blocking theirs as well. So when we give thanks, when we generously receive that good that somebody offers, we are blessing ourselves. We are saying, I am worthy. We are claiming our own worthiness because we are inherently worthy. And we are allowing that person to experience the joy of giving. So it works hand in hand. Generous giving, generous receiving. So here are some things to drop. And these may sound familiar when somebody gives something to you. Oh, you shouldn't have, right? What does that do? It blocks the flow. Or somebody gives you a compliment. You say, oh, this old thing? You block the flow, not only of yourself, but of the other person. So what would be a better thing to say? Thank you so much. And open your arms and receive it. Rub it in. Yeah, rub it in. Receive it. So, the principle of giving and receiving then is in all life, and a really great example, because we've been talking about the breath today, a really great example is in the exhale of carbon dioxide. Is what? It's nourishment for the plants. So, what seems like waste to us is nourishment for the plant kingdom. And then the exhale of the plant is oxygen, which is nourishment for, and that beautiful cycle of life, and it's present everywhere. There are lots of examples. And again, if we say it's better, it's better to exhale than inhale, which is what we say when we say it's better to give than receive. I'm really trying to break this paradigm. Can you see that? That we live out of balance. I'd like us all to be living healthy, balanced lives. And so it is important to practice something called radical self-care, to give yourself the time in meditation, in spiritual study, in connection with other people, friends or whatever, just nourishing situations that nourish our souls. And then it's also important to remember when we do these things, we're not only receiving, we're actually giving as well, because we're raising our vibration. We're giving back to the consciousness of humanity. Think about that. By raising our vibrations through receiving, we are giving something to a gift to all of humanity because we're all connected. So again, the corollary of the more you give, the more you receive is the more you receive, the more you have to give. I love it. It's like those algebraic equations, right? Each side must balance the other. So much of humanity, think about it, lives in the paradigm of scarcity, not enough. And that paradigm of scarcity, not enough, is what fuels the fear. I've got to get mine, right? It fuels the fear and it fuels hatred. That's why it's so important that we embody this balance of giving and receiving, that we fill ourselves up, fill our cups up with the goodness of life through our spiritual practice and through taking good care of ourselves, so that we then are able to be generous receivers. And that scarcity belief actually shows up in the breath. Bob Simo was talking about this. It's called what it is. It's called the breathing pattern. It's called breathing pattern disorder, shallow breathing pattern disorder, a reflection of a belief in scarcity. So, and again, another thing that we can do to increase our consciousness of abundance is to practice deep breathing. Long, deep, slow breathing. So let's do that now, okay? I always like to make these things practical, and let's have an experience of it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to he says always start with an exhale, because we want to clear the lungs out from the very bottom. I remember my vocal coach told me that when he was a high school music director, he'd have his students do this, empty their lungs out. He had one student come up and give the example, and out of the bottom of this kid's lungs came cigarette smoke. It was stored down in the bottom of his lungs. So if we don't empty out our lungs, we have all of this stale air that hangs out in the bottom. So we want to start with a deep exhale that pushes it all the way out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to notice how it's just automatic. for a deep inhale, right? Or yeah, deep inhale. A deep, and also to think of it as receiving instead of taking a breath. I'm receiving a breath. So if we push it all out first, then we are receiving. It's natural. We just receive this beautiful, rich, new, fresh air. The other thing I'd like us to do when we are exhaling is to say the word ah, because scientific evidence shows that the ah stimulates the vagus nerve that is called the holy grail of wellness. So, stimulating the vagus nerve actually supports our health, our well being, our creativity, all of the good things that we really want in our lives. And the byproduct of all of this is an awareness of oneness. It expands our consciousness, and we begin to embody oneness through the breath, a really beautiful practice of deepening the teachings that we teach here. So let's go ahead and do it. We're going to do an ah on the exhale and blow every last little bit of breath out. Ready? We're blowing out first. Ah. And notice what happens. What happens to your lungs when you breathe in, when you receive that breath? It begins to expand. And let's do that one more time, a really long exhale. And what do you notice in your body? What do you notice? Anybody? Relaxation. Yeah, it stimulates the relaxation response. And again, scientific evidence shows is that that long exhale like that turns on the parasympathetic system, which is the relaxation response. And the inhale does the other. But when you do long, deep, slow breaths like that, you begin to create a state that is much more relaxed and open. That means the opposite of fear, right? Because when we're in a state of shallow breath, we're in a state of fear. It kind of goes hand in hand. So long, deep, slow breaths in the way that I just showed you. So we're all going to be walking around, right? Ah, going. Well, you can be in wonder, in the awe and wonder of life. But anyway, the beauty of it is that we can all begin to expand our consciousness of abundance with the breath. The breath. Rudyard Kipling was a great British poet whose writings have touched and blessed many of us. And he was also, through his writings, a very wealthy man. And one day a reporter came up to him and said, Mr. Kipling, are you aware that somebody has calculated that each one of your words is worth $100? And he thought about it and he said, that's amazing. No, I was not aware of that. And so the reporter pulls out a $100 bill and gives it to him. And he says, okay, Mr. Kipling, and he says it with a little bit of cynicism. Okay, Mr. Kipling, give me one of your $100 words. And so Mr. Kipling looks at the dollar, folds it up, puts it in his pocket, and says, thanks. Yeah, and think about gratitude. Gratitude is a way that we receive generously. It's a way that we remind ourselves of the gift of life that just keeps on giving. It's such a beautiful thing. So everything is in circles then. The law of giving and receiving, the law of circulation, it's sometimes called. And it happens on all levels of existence because every level of existence emanates from the one spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. And so this law is found in every aspect of our lives and all over the planet and in the universe. And so when we give our attention only to giving, We become out of balance. So it's important then, therefore, to give just as much importance to generously giving and generously receiving, to live in the fullness of the divine flow of abundance. And it therefore reflects the unity of all life, the oneness of all life. So my call to all of you this week is to begin to notice all of the gifts of life that are offered to you. And not just from people, but as you drive, look around you at the gift of life. The fall leaves, the sky, the rain, whatever it might be, begin to notice and to receive and say thank you. Say thank you, for whatever it is. And notice how you begin to feel. Because remember, we're vibrational beings. As we begin to raise our vibration through gratitude, and that's one of the greatest ways to do it, we begin to be more open to the good and more able to give generously as well. And then I also am inviting you to meditate on the gift that you are giving by receiving generously. And so it is, my friends.